Welcome back to flight number 2 of our Argentina class. Let's talk about reds and specifically crushable reds. As we said, Argentina is mainly famous for their age-worthy, very lush, very concentrated reds. And that is only one part of the magic. Here we have 3 beautiful examples of wines that are by no means concentrated, by no means in need of aging. They're fresh, they're youthful, and they're fantastic to drink just by itself or on a hot day like today. I think today is like 88, so it's perfect for a day like today. Here we're narrowing down a bit. All 3 of these wines are from Mendoza in the Cuyo region. So we are still at the foothill of the Andes, still relatively high in altitude with very, very sunny days and still cool winters with very warm summers. And these are just 3 beautiful examples of what's going on with the grape varieties in Argentina. Our first wine is Versaprum Garnacha. This is a fantastic project that is a very, very tiny winery, and they have vineyards scattered all around Mendoza, and they try to make wine that is a pure expression of the place that they come from. So there's very little intervention. Everything is done very, very much in a natural fashion, and wines are intended to be drunk young, and they're very straightforward, very expressive, and very refreshing. Some of them are actually the classic Spanish varieties. So right here we have a Garnacha, also known as Grenache in France. And this Garnacha is made to be a super delicate wine. I don't know if you can see the color. It's a very, very light ruby color. And the way that they achieve this is by doing semi-carbonic maceration, which is leaving full clusters in with the juice for 4 days. So the extraction of the aromas is very, very high, and you get these fantastic aromas of raspberry and strawberry that just burst out of the glass. And after that, they extract all the skins, and then they finish the fermentation without any skin contact, which gives us this beautiful, super light, super clear red. This Garnacha has all the characteristics of the Garnacha in the nose. And it's funny because this is a grape that you normally use as an example of a grape that's finicky when it comes to ripening. It does need a good deal of sunlight. So in Mendoza, it's finding a beautiful spot to grow and thrive with enough sunlight to express all of its aromas without getting excessively alcoholic. So here you have your perfect alternative to Pinot Noir or some other light-bodied variety. There's a lot going on in the nose. There's a lot of those red fruit characters. There's a little bit of minerality in the mouth. And it's just perfectly balanced. There's a palate that's round, that doesn't have any sharp edges, and that is refreshing and very, very delicate. I love this wine. This is a winery that is located in the east of Mendoza, but they bring their wines from all over Mendoza. There are 4 people also in this team. They call themselves a team Grenachista because they started with this new wave of Garnacha being one of the most interesting grapes in Mendoza. This comes from Valle de Uco, as we said, especially from that former riverbed that we have in Valle de Uco. So there's a lot of calcareous stones, a lot of river stones. So the roots of the plants have to dig very deep in order to get their nutrients and their water. And that makes up for a wine that has a lot of aromas and that doesn't necessarily get very, very sugary, which then transforms to a lower alcohol composition. Talking about the East, here we have one of the grapes that I like to talk the most about from the Argentinian ones. What we have here is Colonia Las Liebres, Bonarda Clásica. And Bonarda, until 2011, was the most widely planted red in Mendoza. And there's a reason for that. Bonarda actually comes from the Savoy region in France, but it's a widely adapted variety in Italy. And the Italians brought it with them during the immigration that happened in the early 1900s. And they discovered that it can actually thrive in Mendoza. It endures hot temperatures very well, so you don't really need to be at the very foothill of the Andes in order to look for that cooler climate. You can plant it all around, it yields fantastically, and it endures pests and diseases really well. So that created a very high yielding vineyard mass that was mainly to supply the domestic demand. Back in the 70s, Argentinians drank around 25 gallons of wine per capita per year, which is a massive amount. And it was mostly terrible wine. There wasn't much in when it came to the flavors and the aromas, and let's not even talk about aging potential. It was just fresh and very oxidized wine that was just meant to be drunk with every single meal, which is something that in Argentina we grow up used to. It's unassuming, relatively low quality, and it was produced in such a big amount that there were actually pipes that would pump the wine from one location to the other in order to be placed in barrels on the trains that would then like scatter it all around Argentina. So you can imagine if there's a pipe that's in the middle of the sunlight and in the middle of summer, the wine that's running inside that is not going to keep all its fragrance and all its delicacy. It's really going to taste cooked and oxidized. Also, the production was very massive. They were put in these very big vats of used French oak, and they would just fill it until whatever level they could, and they were left exposed to the oxygen. So we're talking about now the most exciting wine in the world back then. Then around the mid-80s and the early 90s, people started to realize that the combination of soil and climate and location actually was one of the most exciting in the world, and there were actually resources and conditions given to produce really high-end wine. So only then is when the wine industry turned towards making wine that could last a little bit longer and have a better representation of the flavors of the grapes. So there were a lot of discoveries, one of which was Malbec, and how Malbec does really, really well in Mendoza especially. So with that, Bonarda was a little left behind, a little set aside as the grape for massive everyday jug wine, just for the households. And that gave it a little bit of a bad reputation as well. You have a wine that has been for generations being made in a not so great style. You're probably gonna not want to try a bottle of something that claims to be really good Bonarda. So luckily, that doesn't really happen anywhere else in the world. So Bonarda actually started having a comeback because of exports. And this is one of the wineries that discovered that there was a future for Bonarda as a high-end wine and actually as a pairable wine. And they started from scratch and did beautiful discoveries with this Bonarda. Let's talk about the grape. This is super dark in color. You can actually see that it stains the walls of your glass. There's this rich aroma of blackberries and blueberries. But it has two major feats. One, that it's relatively high acid. So what smells like this beautiful combination of red berries in the mouth tastes super delicate and really, really refreshing with a very juicy acidity. And also, it's relatively low in tannins. So it doesn't give you that gritty, grippy sensation in your mouth, which makes it a wine that's very also easygoing with food. So for those meals that you classically would say don't pair well with red wine, or you would use a Pinot Noir as your alternative in a red wine, you can definitely use a youthful, fresh Bonarda such as this, because the low tannin and the high fresh acidity make it ideal in terms of not overpowering food and make it palate rinser that also has a beautiful, fantastic, complex aroma. One extra like tip. They actually are making such good advances with this Bonarda, and they are growing it in order to be so fresh and crisp that there is actually a bubbly made from Bonarda, and it's slightly pink and super refreshing. That is a lovely wine that I recommend you try, also for a fraction of the price of any of the bubblies from the rest of the world. So it's a really fun one to try. And finally, we've been talking about Malbec without drinking it. So here we are. The first of our row of Malbecs is also a fresh, crisp, youthful one. I really, really like this winery, and I've had the opportunity to work with their owners and their makers. And they only make Malbec. Their producer is called Mal, and they have Malbec in all of their expressions. This one is the most youthful of all their lines of Malbecs. And there's very little intervention in the making of this. The grapes come from Basque, which gives grapes not only that explosive red fruit aromas that we all know about Malbec, but also a little bit of like a violet flower aroma, something that's a little deeper and darker than just red fruit. And in the palate, it's still juicy, refreshing, subtle, very silky. The tannins are very balanced in this. So if you haven't really experienced Malbec in all its different expressions, I suggest that you start with this one. Not a lot of makeup here, not a lot of intervention, no oak, and a lot of concentration, a lot of very expressive aromas, and a very delicate palate. I believe that's it. This is my summary selection of Argentine wines. Thank you.